So let's again, I think we agree on most things, so it would probably be interesting for people if we discuss areas that we might disagree. Um, and actually, I don't know if I disagree with you on this one, but I'll ask you about this one first because you're very passionate about it. Make your case for nihilism.
Nihilism, I would make a simple reductive argument. In the same way that there's no evidence of God, there's no evidence of inherent meaning to existence. Do with that what you will. Now, I mean, you can take that you can take that to I'm a nihilist. There's no meaning in the world, so I'm depressed and I'm sad and I'm gonna be like really surly and stuff. Or you could just be like, I think most reasonable people who come to that realization, which is like, well, I still have meaning in my life. I can still experience the emotion that is meaning, which really it is an emotion. I have a sense of this having some sort of grander meaning. I choose what I value. I can create, these feelings within myself, or they exist there, regardless of whether I create them or not. So I'll just, let that be my guiding star. And I feel like everyone does that, whether they believe in objective meaning or not. Like, if someone does believe there's like an objective meaning, like, what is it? And, if there is one, what if it's horrible? Like, what if you find out the objective meaning of life is like a horrible thing, and like the meaning of life is to suffer and be miserable? It's like, all right, well, you gonna go with that?
Yeah.
Are you gonna question it? So, I don't know. I feel like people who that to me, nihilism is just the absence of meaning. I understand that like most words, different people have different conceptions of what it means. But when I say nihilism, I mean the rejection of inherent meaning to the universe.
So you definitely, it sounds
Or to
like
life.
you don't begrudge people their like deeply held subjective meaning. If anything, you might, cheer that on.
Right, because it's also, I mean, all meaning is subjective. So yeah, I can't begrudge anyone whatever they think means something to them. I mean, sometimes I can, if my meaning clashes with their meaning, then we might have some arguments and stuff about worldviews. And you can break out all the fancy college words about consequentialism or this and that. But at the end of the day, it does kind of all boil down to like subjective interests. I think that, like, ultimately, if I say I'm a leftist, what I'm saying is that I believe that society should be as just and equitable and free from hierarchy as possible. That's what I mean by it. But that those are ultimately subjective things. Like, if you believe that the world should be, divided among the supposed strong and the supposed weak, and that certain men have a right to, endless wealth to rival the GDP of nations, then that's also a subjective belief. It's one that I'm going to fight because I don't understand how anyone would want a world like that. But, if that's where you're at, that's where you're at.
So I haven't really disagreed with anything you've said to this point, but I think the area where we might branch off into a disagreement is, does this concept of nihilism also cross into the realm of morality and ethics? Would you say that's completely subjective as well?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Explain that for everybody.
I mean, it just boils down to the same thing. Like, if there's an objective moral, I mean, what is it? Because no matter what you're talking about, any human activity, no matter how reprehensible, has been normalized under some social condition at some point in time. I mean, like, this country was founded by slave owners, for fuck's sake. If you're going to say that slavery is wrong, I'm going to agree with you. If you're going to say that it's objectively wrong by some sort of external cosmic standard, that just doesn't exist. Now, you can look at the issue through different ethical frameworks. Here's what it looks like through a consequential framework. Here's what it looks like through a utilitarian framework. Here's what it looks like through this framework or that framework. But ultimately, it's just subjective. And I know it's uncomfortable for people because they want this, like, oh God, no, it has to be objectively wrong. Like, enslaving human beings, that offends me on such a deep core level that there has to be some thing outside of myself that can validate that, right? But it's just not there. I mean, I wish it was, maybe, but it's not.
So there's a few responses I have to that. One of them is, let's just give a totally hypothetical scenario where you pick whatever society on the planet, and going back however far you want. Like, let's say you have a neighbor who's a friend of yours and your family's, and you guys have shared meals together and had fun together, and maybe you farm together or whatever the fuck. And then one day, one of the neighbors, when the other neighbor isn't paying attention, goes up behind him and chops his head off with an axe. Wouldn't almost every society, and even if not every society would say, hey, that's immoral, but even if 90% of society said that's immoral, aren't they touching on some sort of objectively immoral? Aren't they touching on some sort of bedrock truth there that perhaps we don't have the language or the capacity to explain as humans?
Well, who might find it very moral is your family when you come back with the dead man's riches and wealth, and then their lifestyle is all of a sudden much more extravagant. And like we in this country accept that, like how much of these products and goods and services that we utilize in this country are built on the suffering of people on the other side of the globe where we can't see them. Human beings have constantly engaged in this sort of like exploitation and brutality to one another throughout history. And, we can find it repugnant, but ultimately it's been morally acceptable. And it is to this day. I mean, apparently, because that's how our society continues to function. Like we still like the lithium in our, the little EV car batteries that we feel so good about is being mined by kids in Africa that don't get that wealth. It's all stolen by multinational predatory corporations and stuff, but that, we're not like, I refuse to use that lithium battery. No, we still use it. The chocolate. Oh, well, that's picked by slave kids. Well, it tastes good. So this is the morality that our country, continues to live on. If we want to, the cool thing about there not being an objective morality is that we can change it. So if we look around at the status quo of like what's morally acceptable and we see like, hey, this is actually quite lacking in my opinion, we can advocate for its change. It's like, look, this system creates unnecessary suffering. We should try to create a system with minimal suffering. To me, that just makes very logical sense. So I think we should employ that. Because if you say there's an objective morality, then your worst enemy can quantify their morality as objective and say, well, no, I think that, this system of brutality and exploitation we've got is actually quite moral. Thank you very much. Because, the free market or whatever justification.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my disagreement with that would be the notion that over time throughout human history, fair-minded people have had this instinct to evolve out of the worst practices, including the ones that you laid out there, of their slaves who are mining the minerals to put in your iPhone, and slaves doing X, Y, or Z thing, which benefits the U.S. economy. And all that stuff is true, but I guess my point is when you explain that to any fair-minded person, they're like, yeah, we should probably stop that. And where does that come from? I'm arguing it's not arbitrary. It's something bedrock that we can't explain.
Well, the iPhone is built on exploitation. Yeah, we should totally stop that. Hold on, I'm getting a call. What's up? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but so that's the Ben Shapiro, yet you participate in society, right, but you want to fix it.
But you do, though, right? I mean, we all do. So, tacitly, through our actions, we're all sort of, rubber stamping this every day. And, I get it. There's not, much of an alternative for us. It's unless you want to go, I'm going to go wander off into the woods and live in a treehouse. But, still, by and large, we're all participating in this society. And it's if you participate in a society where slavery is codified, then you're part of that system, right? I mean, you're still a collaborator in that. You don't get to just say, well, that's just that's the way society is, so it's totally excusable, and I'm free from guilt. I'm blameless in this. I came here and this was already going on. I am blameless. I think everyone has to realize that there's culpability. It's not to say that everything that you're saying against this society is what Ben Shapiro's doing is saying, you can't criticize this because you participate in it. I'm not saying you can't criticize it because you participate in it. I'm just saying that realize your complicity in what the system is.
So let me just make an analogy real quick, because this is a way that helped me understand it. But so when a person is born, there's, code for you in your DNA and your genetics, and you basically, the baby is going to grow and become a teen and then become an adult human. And like the process of that is not arbitrary. And so the point that Chomsky makes, not in regards to this, but in regards to the conversation about freedom, is he says, think of human freedom like an instinct or an evolutionary process. And over time, human beings, generally the trend is we keep pushing more and more and more for more freedom, more autonomy, more independence, and generally improving the situation around us. And I think my takeaway from that in the realm of morality and ethics is that maybe my puny human brain and capacity to understand the world just doesn't have the proper mechanisms to grasp that there is maybe some sort of innate natural law that gives us an instinct and an evolutionary process to get towards a better future that is actually objectively better, that is not just subjective and hey, your opinion of murdering is okay. That's just as valid as this person saying it's not okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's better frameworks to look at it through than the lens of morality, because it's just kind of a messy one. I think that, you could say, look, tangibly, we have a situation here where less people are suffering, more people are prospering, more people can feed themselves, more people can clothe themselves, more people can, do these basic human happiness. So the more the higher up the bottom of society is, the more that people on the bottom can enjoy some quality of life, the more you can be assured that you're not going to end up, homeless on the streets or something. The more you can be assured that you live in a functional place with a strong social safety net. And, there's a lot of people that work towards that. There's a lot of people that work against that. Usually it's people who have already achieved some success, or people who have been, scared into it by, these weird little culture war issues. But, I just feel like the will to improve our station, the will to improve our state of being is something that's pretty much something that's part and parcel for all organisms. It's not just human beings that do that. Most animals are trying to create ideal conditions for themselves. A bee doesn't create a hive of misery. They create a functional one where they can all get the honey and serve the queen and protect the offspring and whatever their instincts might be. An animal like a gorilla or something is not, trying to not have a cool territory. He's trying to have an awesome territory and a big harem of female gorillas. So it's just most creatures are seeking out the best possible situation for themselves that they can possibly muster up. Human beings are no different. And this same will towards improvement, by the way, is also what drives men like Jeff Bezos to accrue fortunes that could, buy off, entire countries, because he's trying to improve his situation. It's gotten out of control in him. It's just more. Yes. So much resources marshaled to my command. It's the same impetus. The idea that human beings want something better for themselves, it can be a driver of what I consider to be good things. It can be a driver of what I consider to be bad things. So I don't know that it's necessarily all a rosy picture there.
Yeah, I mean, those are all poignant points, I guess. And I'll give you the last word on the issue of nihilism in a second. But I guess my final thing I'd say on it is, particularly in the realm of morality and ethics as it pertains to nihilism, the Supreme Court once said when they were deciding a case on the issue of porn, they were asked what constitutes porn, and they said effectively, partly in jest but also seriously, they said, quote, "We know it when we see it." And I kind of feel like that about morality and ethics, that when I look at certain things, genocide, war crimes, torture, murder, and, there's a list of them, but I do feel comfortable saying that they're objectively wrong, even though I can't necessarily put an equation on a blackboard and prove it.
Right, but I mean, the fact that genocides have occurred kind of shows that a lot of people have looked at it and said, like, yeah, that's good. So,
yeah, but they're wrong, is my point.
Well, I mean, they could be wrong, but like, if it's objective, then, how come everyone's not built with this innate, like, I know it when I sees it, They knew it when they saw it too. They went with that same logic and it led them to genocide people, They knew it when they saw it. I knew when I saw them Jews that it was probably better if they were just gone, I just know it. Because that's just like I feel that's true morally.
The argument is that that's a perversion of the instinct. If you ever read the book Ordinary Men, you get the sense that a lot of the people who were shoving Jews in gas chambers were like, I kind of know this is fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, that's true.
Yeah.
I think that most people have an aversion to hurting other people. So,
right.
Which is a good thing because that's just like, as a social animal, it's obviously usually in our best interest to not harm each other, and usually when human beings do harm each other, it's because they've been convinced to pseudo-speciate them, which is to like remove them from humanity in their minds. The Jew is a mongrel dog. Right. He is not a human. Or, I definitely see it in the rhetoric of a lot of like right-wingers when they talk about immigrants.
Yeah,
there's like a certain degree of dehumanization. I think it can be pretty extreme in some cases, by the way.
That takes a lot of brainwashing, a lot of propaganda, and then what definitely doesn't hurt is you mix in some terrible material conditions, sort of like what led to World War II when you had the Treaty of Versailles, which totally fucked Germany for a generation. And so you mix in like material and economic deprivation with brainwashing and scapegoating, and it's like the perfect brew to make people absolute monsters.